we've just heard that the former chief of staff of Trump, Mark Meadows, has just surrendered. And this, of course, was a man who tried to get an extension on this Friday deadline that was rejected. So he's now surrendered. What more can you tell us?
That's right. He had tried to file a motion to delay his surrender, hoping to get in front of a federal judge to get his case removed from state court to federal court, arguing that a federal statute protects him as a federal official, saying that anyone that is charged with the crime, an alleged crime, while they're operating as a federal official should have their criminal proceedings moved from state court to federal court. A U.S. district judge ruled against his delay, so he had to surrender, and he did so within the last hour. And it's really interesting because about 30 minutes or so ago, we did see some black SUVs approach this main entrance here in the Fulton County Jail, and we initially thought it was Secret Service vehicles, but then we saw his name populate on the jail records, so that timing seems to match up with Mark Meadows having arrived here just a short time ago. He has maintained a relatively low profile as his former boss is in legal peril, dealing with 4 indictments in the last 5 months. We are out here in anticipation, just hours away from the former president arriving here at the Fulton County Jail, certainly the most high-profile, most notable person that has ever stepped foot in this jail. And with that comes a lot of pressure dealing with security. And sources tell us that there are several law enforcement agencies that are part of a mutual aid agreement, and they're working coordination around this Fulton County complex. Part of that is because of the explosive rhetoric coming from the former president, calling the district attorney in this case a racist, calling this investigation political in nature. And he also put an all-call to get his supporters out here. And we saw just that. Even before the sun came up, we saw supporters walking up and down this street, which has since been closed off, walking with signs supporting Trump, honking in support of the president. Those crowds have been moved to the other side of the facility. And in response to those crowds, several teams with tactical gear showed up. The environment, though, has been contained and is relatively calm, though there is a large crowd there for the president showing support. It remains to be seen whether or not the sheriff here will keep true to his pledge in treating the former president like everybody else who checks themselves in, or who surrenders, I should say, to this Fulton County Jail. Will we see a mugshot? That's the big question, just hours away from the former president's surrender here. Lynda?
Yeah, the first mugshot of a president, a former president here in the United States. Nick Valencia, good to have you with us. Thank you. Well, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump was a no-show at Wednesday night's presidential debate. This is the first of the U.S. primary season amongst Republicans. It's often considered the life of the grand old party. Even in his absence, he managed to dominate the event, which is hosted by Fox News. There were 8 leading U.S. Republicans on stage. And when the moderators asked about the former president, most of the candidates stood firmly in his corner. Take a look.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Let's just speak the truth, okay? President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century.
Whether or not you believe that the criminal charges are right or wrong, the conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States.
Well, right now I want to bring in CNN's U.S. national politics reporter Eva McCann, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us.
Nice to see you.
So Trump skipped the debate, instead giving an interview to former Fox host Tucker Carlson, which was then posted online and made very little news. But he was still a focus point at the debate last night. We just saw that question. Would you pardon Donald Trump if he was convicted? Almost everyone said yes, they would. Even Mike Pence, his former vice president. What did you make of that?
Well, Lynda, they are listening to the Republican primary voters. I've traveled to some of these early states, and even these voters that have more of an appetite for moving on, have real concerns about former President Trump being able to win in a general election. They don't necessarily have animus towards him. They still are really grateful for him, that he was able to deliver on a number of conservative victories, whether it was curtailing abortion access in this country, delivering 3 conservative Supreme Court justices. And so that is why we see this real hesitance, this real reticence to go after Trump directly, even though he is the front runner, because what you see is that these candidates don't want to alienate these primary voters.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly obviously try to want to tap into some of Trump's base. And we did hear from one of the youngest candidates, Ramaswamy, who stood out. But he sounded inconsistent with what he's said in the past on the record about climate change. I just want to play some sound from him last night when he called climate change a hoax, and listen to the reaction he got.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax, and we have to declare independence for it.
It's interesting to point out that 5 months ago, he said on record in an interview that the climate is warming, that humans are contributing to this climate crisis. What do you make of his statement last night, and did he manage to pull any voters away from Trump?
Well, he says the agenda is a hoax. So he's arguing that, the so-called administrative state, as he calls it, that their response to it is largely disproportional to the crisis. Obviously, there is widespread disagreement on this among conservatives. And I think it's remarkable because there was an audience question. There was a video of an audience question of a young conservative voter asking these candidates how seriously they take climate change. And it's remarkable, Vivek Ramaswamy, the youngest person on that stage, he was the one most forcefully pushing back against the responses to climate change. I don't know if he gained any new voters from this response or from his entire performance, but it is quite remarkable that being up there, he's the one with the least amount of government experience. And his profile has only gotten larger. He was virtually an unknown 6 months ago. And here he is on stage calling the former Vice President Mike Pence by first name, repeatedly throughout the evening referring to him as Mike. And we see Ramaswamy just surging in the polls. I don't know if that translates to electoral victories. I don't know if he's able to pull off a big win in Iowa with caucus voters in the next 5 months, with Trump still really commanding such a significant lead. But certainly, Lynda, more people in this country know Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes, and as you say, he's surging in the federal polls. But as the former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie said, in New Hampshire, in some of the primaries, he's still ahead. It's interesting to note, though, when you look at the likes of the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, at the outset of this campaign run, he was meant to be the biggest challenger to Trump, but he seemed to be some of the background noise last night. He didn't stand out as much as someone like Nikki Haley, for example. I just want to play some sound of what she had to say about her foreign policy credentials and experience.
Ukraine is the first line of defense for us. And the problem that Vivek doesn't understand is he wants to hand Ukraine to Russia. He wants to let China eat Taiwan. He wants to go and stop funding Israel. You don't do that to friends. What you do instead is you have the backs of your friends.
So how are voters viewing her performance and Ron DeSantis' performance last night at that debate?
So time will tell. She will get back out on the campaign trail, have an aggressive schedule, and we'll see how voters respond to this. But it was a good night for Nikki Haley in that she was able to have several moments. And keep in mind, Lynda, they're not only sort of doing this to raise their profile and to speak and connect with voters. This is also sort of a performance for the donor class that is really consequential in the months ahead. You can only run a campaign for as long as you can fund a campaign. And in speaking to some in that donor class after the debate, speaking to them this morning, they were really pleased by her performance.
Yeah, she certainly sounded very strong and made some interesting points.